Welcome to The Green Rush, a podcast about the intersection of cannabis, the capital markets, and culture. On a weekly basis, hosts Ann Donahoe and Louis Goldberg of KCSA Strategic Communications speak with the business leaders, financial experts, cultural icons, legislators, and generally interesting people moving the cannabis industry forward. This week, Louis and Ann are speaking with Troy Dayton, Chief Strategy Officer and co-founder of the Arcview Group. If you're not familiar with the Arcview Group, they're the largest collection of high net worth investors who focus on putting money into early stage cannabis companies. Troy, along with Steve D'Angelo of Harborside fame, started Arcview back in 2010, and ever since, many major American cannabis companies have presented to their members and raised capital from the group. Troy's story is an important one for the cannabis industry. A quick disclosure here, I've personally known Troy for more than 20 years now, as he was one of the first people in drug policy reform that I met in the late 1990s, and one of the people who helped me start Students for Sensible Drug Policy. So don't sit back, lean forward. Now on to our conversation with Troy Dayton of the Arcview Group.
Good morning, Ann.
Good morning.
We don't normally record these shows in the morning since you're in LA and I'm in New York, and it may be 10 o'clock for me, but it's 7 o'clock for you. So are you still in your pajamas?
No, I'm at the office.
Look at that. This is what
I know.
One of the many, many reasons why I love you. You are the best.
I'm a dedicated employee.
Yeah, committed. Should be.
That too.
Yes. It's 2020. We're recording this on January 22nd, which a couple of weeks before the Arcview conference in Santa Monica. And Arcview is a new client of ours, and we're going to be having Troy Dayton, the co-founder and chief strategy officer, on this episode.
Troy is awesome.
Troy is awesome. And we're going to talk to him about his background, which isn't just the finance side of the business. I mean, he comes out of advocacy. And one of the cool things about Troy, and look at that, here he is, Troy Dayton walking in. Good morning. One of the coolest things about Troy, is that he can talk to both the history of the movement and the history of the industry. And it's, and on top
He's a unicorn.
He is a unicorn. Troy, this is Ann Donahoe.
Hi, Ann. How are you?
Hey.
So we were just doing our banter before we start, but fuck it, let's just jump right in, man. You've got your coffee. Yep. You don't have a bagel, so even though we're here in New York and you're a Jersey boy. And by the way, one of the things I've noticed about this industry, a lot of Jersey people in it, right?
I don't think I knew Troy was from New Jersey.
Yeah, he's
Hillsborough, New Jersey.
Where?
Hillsborough, Central. There's Somerville, Princeton, Bridgewater.
Oh, interesting.
Now his mic is hot. Now your mic is hot, Troy.
All right. Excited.
So yes, Jersey people tend to have an outsized role in this industry, and New Yorkers, even though California has been the locus, and Colorado and Oregon, there's a lot of us out
it's like
there.
a clown car,
Oh,
So many
That
people
is so
coming out
true
of
for
it.
New Jersey. Yes, I am still struggling with a cold. So many of our listeners are familiar with Arcview, but probably many are not. Why don't you take a moment and just tell us, what is Arcview? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so since 2010, we've been gathering investors and entrepreneurs in the cannabis sector. So far, we've helped over 1,500 high net worth investors and venture funds place over $250 million into over 200 companies, most of which are, a lot of the companies you probably recognize and know, and people you've had on your show.
Or our clients.
And many of your clients, exactly. And so that's the main thing we've been doing.
Can you name some names?
Oh, sure. Forefront, MedMen, Tokyo Smoke, which got acquired by Canopy Growth, Ebu, which got acquired by Canopy Growth.
God bless Canopy Growth.
Spark, Harborside, Ease. We're hearing a lot about Ease. Well, Ease presented to our investors in 2015 at a $5 million valuation. Right?
And now it's valued somewhere north
300, 400. Yeah.
Oof.
I mean, they're going through some challenges right now, but it's important to remember that, like, this is it's really been a fun ride to be able to see a lot of these companies. I mean, MedMen presented on our stage to our investors at a $30 million valuation, right? Even though MedMen's going through a lot of challenges, they're still worth more than $30 million.
They're worth a lot more than $30 million. So if you had gotten in, how does one become a member of Arcview?
Mm-hmm. So if you're an accredited investor, meaning that you have at least $1 million in net assets, or you've made at least $200,000 a year for the last 2 years, then you can become an Arcview member. Or if you're a venture fund or you're representing somebody else's money, it's $3,500 is the initiation fee, and then it's $300 a year after that. And
you guys,
it's a very unique kind of community of people that help each other. It's not just about finding new deals. It's about having a peer network of people who can help you look at deals and make sure you understand the deals and have experts you can call on. Because as we're starting to now see in the sector, the difference between a company that's really successful and one that goes down the tubes and runs out of money and disappears is a very thin line, right? And so understanding the nuances of their strategy, of the people that are there, can be the difference between having a 40x and losing all your money.
You had started the Arcview with Steve D'Angelo, who we had the pleasure of interviewing at MJ Biz a couple of weeks ago, and last year, Arcview took an A round of investment from Entourage of Effect Capital and Ampology. What does that mean for you and your members?
Well, what's great about it is a wide range of our members actually participated in that round as well. So I think we have over 30 or 40 of our members that are invested in that round as well. So it's really a family, and both Ampology and Entourage Effect were longtime Arcview members before they kind of led this round, and so they really understood sort of the special sauce and the unique nature of the community that we've built. And so now with additional capital and additional talent resources, we're really able to create a much better experience with even better companies, even more support, and a wide range of sort of other services that we're
better
able to...
Better PR.
Yeah, better PR, right? We've got KCSA on the job. We're adding a lot of different ways for investors to be involved, not just the way we've been doing it, which is with investors and we bring them companies that they can look at, but also we just launched a member managed fund where people can actually put capital to use with a group of people together and make decisions about their money together in
How does that investment committee work, right? So for Entourage, for example, they have 5, 6, 7 GPs, and that tends to be the investment committee. There are hundreds of Arcview members. So for your fund, how does the investment committee work?
Yeah, well, for this fund, we're also going to do more of a traditional venture fund as well. But for the member managed fund, it's really neat. It's $75,000 for a unit, and you become part of the GP. Everybody becomes part of the GP. So if you participate in a lot of the meetings, if you join the due diligence committees, if you bring a deal, there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can earn carried interest. So you get to participate as the profit interest, like a regular venture fund would in the general partnership, and that's kind of how it works. And then the whole membership votes on every deal, but not everybody has looked deeply into it. So you have a subcommittee that has really gone deep on a particular company, and then they present their findings to the general group. And then you also tend to get follow-on rights and stuff in it. So it's a really great, if you're somebody that really knows angel investing, it's really, really great because you get to share your knowledge and you get to cross-purpose your knowledge with people that know other things. And if you're not experienced in angel investing, it's great because you get to learn right next to the greats who have where you're all on the same side of the thing. People respond very differently when their actual money is at stake versus when they're just sort of sitting in an audience and voting.
You said each unit is $75,000. Can you do a syndicate to get to that? So if I personally couldn't write a $75,000 check, but I could write a $25,000 check, and I had two friends, could we create our own vehicle and put 70?
Louis, do you need to take this offline?
No, I'm not. No. The reason why I'm asking is because, unlike traditional VC funds and unlike others, there is that floor, but sometimes they will allow you to create another vehicle to invest. If you can't write a $250,000 check, you can get 5 guys or 5 women to put together and create.
I'm actually not sure if that's possible. My hunch is that it's not, but I could be wrong.
So you founded Arcview and have led it for its entirety up until recently.
Yes.
You hired a new president, Kim Kovacs. Can you tell us about her and what her vision is, and also what's it like to give up control of your baby?
Yeah. Well, Kim is great. We could not have possibly chosen someone better. It was pretty unanimous among the board, among Ampology, among Entourage. Everybody was just like, yes, this is our person. And what's great about Kim is she also comes out of the Arcview family. So she was an Arcview member as an investor. And then she started a company called My Jane, which she presented from our stage to our investors, where she raised money. And then she wound up selling her company to a company that she met at Arcview.
Wow.
And so,
people really do win on MTV.
Right, exactly. So it's just one of the, she's been at every stage of the business, so she gets our value proposition. She knows what works about what we do. She also knows what doesn't work. She also knows where there's an opportunity for improvement because she can see it from all those angles. And she's grown and sold over 5 companies already, some really huge successes in there. And she has and been very involved in the venture community in Southern California. So she really, really gets all the little pieces. And she just came on, a week and a half ago, and just so impressed so far. And we'll really be seeing, we're going to be spending a lot of time over the next few weeks really getting into it and really getting a sense of where we're headed. But I couldn't be more excited. And as it relates to me, I also couldn't be more excited that somebody else has this all weighing on their shoulders now. In many, and we'll probably get into this in a little bit, but in many ways, I was an accidental CEO. Right?
Okay.
I'm much more of a vision kind of person, an idea person, a public person. And actual implementation, I'm good enough at it, obviously.
Yeah, I would say Arcview has been a success,
but it's not my sweet spot. It's to me being focused on implementation can be very narrowing, right? I do much better with a wider focus, and so this is allowing me to do that. I am now out there. Kind of talking to the public, talking to our members, thinking about strategy, and thinking about a lot of the political work, and really being an emissary for the brand. But I still serve on the board, and all of that. So I do have structural power.
And we're going to talk about
politics,
both specific to the federal level, and then also what was just announced in Washington State, which is like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
But what is Kim's remit? Like, what is Arcview has 500 or 600 members now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what is her focus for the next 12 to 18 months?
Growing membership. Really focusing on the value proposition to investors to really ramp that up. I mean, we want to have thousands of members, and so that's.
Can I ask a question about when we think of angel investors and VCs? Like, it's a very specific category, but what does an angel investor actually look like at Arcview? Like, where these people what were their professions? Were they former, tech entrepreneurs? Was it family money? Like, how did they, I guess, what are they bringing to the table, and what are they finding of interest in cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of an interesting motley crew of a wide range of different.
So Vince
people.
Neil is there,
right? Yeah. We do have some celebrities that are somewhat incognito as members, but so it really runs the gamut. So we have, but I'll give you a couple of the buckets. Right? There's a lot of people who've been very successful in more traditional business. Either as entrepreneurs or as just high-level executives in Fortune 500 CPG companies, et cetera, who are now in their either their side time or have made the transition to full-time, are investing in the sector, and so we see a lot of those people. Kind of the millionaire next door,
sure,
who is interested in this for one reason or another. Many of them have experiences with cannabis in their families, with a loved one or themselves, that has also really inspired them. We also have family offices. One of the interesting things is we see a lot of the kids of really well-known families that have had enormous wealth, and it's the kids, it's the first time, this is the first industry that they got excited about being part of the sort of the family business. So we see a lot of parent-child situations from that. And then also a lot of the venture
But Dad,
firms.
I really want to write a check.
Right. Exactly. And it's kind of a fun thing often, too, because, for a lot of these kids, their parents were upset with them as when they were teenagers or in college or whatever about their cannabis consumption. And now, they've been able to kind of heal that wound by being in business together, which is kind of always interesting
circle.
to see.
It's the healing power of cannabis.
Yep. But we also see venture capital funds. We see people from more traditional finance who are kind of, people. We have a bunch of people from the big banks who are theoretically doing this in their off time. But of course, what they're doing is they're researching this because they want to be the pioneer within their organization. And if their organization doesn't hop on it, then maybe they'll peel off and do their own thing, which is how we got most of the venture funds in our space.
How big are the checks that people write?
It really runs the gamut. I mean, we have people writing $1 million, $2 million, $3 million checks into companies. And then you also have a wide range of people that write $50,000 or $100,000 checks.
Well, so your event is coming up next week. No, 2 weeks? 2 weeks.
That's right.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yes,
February
in Santa
4th
Monica,
through 6th.
Right? And assuming most of our listeners have not been to an Arcview event, can you walk us through one and what they can expect?
If I told you, Ann, I'd have to kill you. It's very private and very secretive. No, I'm just kidding.
You do realize you're talking
Yeah,
both
I know.
publicly
I'm
on
like,
a
did you not
podcast,
read the
and you've
rules
hired
here?
a PR firm.
Oh, I've hired a PR firm. Oh, shoot. Okay, can't have both worlds.
Oh
huh?
man.
No. It's really different than most events that people go to. I think that most events that people go to, particularly business events, particularly cannabis events, what it really boils down to is it's a bunch of people trading business cards. Oh, what do you do? Oh, what do you do? Oh, maybe, here's my business card. And everybody's out there selling each other, right? What I think makes Arcview different is, one, it's curated, right? So nobody is there if they haven't been invited. And if they're not, qualified in some way, shape, or form. If they're a company, they've been invited there, either because they've gone through a selection process, or because they're a sponsor and because we feel like they're good people to be there. And if they're an investor, they're there because they're there to place capital. And so that really changes things. But there's also another X factor, which is that we're there to help each other. It's really a community. And the investors that are there collectively to evaluate these companies. And that changes the whole. If you're there to work with somebody that's sitting next to you on a project together, it totally changes how people interact. And so it really feels like family. And the camaraderie is remarkable. And so we spend 3 days with lots of different things to get people in contact with each other. We're going to be doing roundtables, for example, where we get into small groups to discuss a wide range of interesting topics that are relevant to investors in the sector. And lots of, cocktail hours and things like that where people get a chance to really get in contact with each other. And of course, every member has an account manager. So imagine you're going to a MJ Biz or any of the other events, and imagine there was somebody there that was there to help you get connected to the people that are most going to help you accomplish your goal in the cannabis sector. That's what we're doing. So there's a lot of personal attention that goes into it. And also, everyone wants to help everybody else. So, when one Arcview member calls another Arcview member, the other member usually picks up, right?
So the companies that are there, right?
Yeah.
If I'm a drinks company,
Yeah.
is it like Shark Tank where I go up and I pitch, or how does that work?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. If you've gone through the selection process, which is the process by which, usually there's 9 or 10 companies at each event that have gone through the selection process and been selected. And by the way, that process is totally free. There is zero cost for the company. We're not taking a piece of the deal, none of that, right? Our goal is to just get the best companies there. And so they apply, and Louis Hahn, who's our Director of Entrepreneur Relations, reviews most of them, and then has them submit something if he thinks that there's something of interest, has them submit something more fully, and then they present to our selection committee via a webinar. And that committee then decides, has a number of meetings, and we have different people that are focused on different issue areas. They then choose the companies based on that, and then once they've agreed on the 8 or 9 companies, then they're paired up with a mentor within the group that is kind of like their champion that helps them kind of really put their best foot forward for this group. And then they're also assigned 3 judges, what we used to call sharks, but now we call expert judges for our Ready to Invest segment. And those people are kind of there to be the devil's advocate. They're there to ask the tough questions that are probably floating around the audience. And their goal is to let the company know what those things are likely to be before they're up there so that they get a chance to really address and pull out the concerns so that they have a chance to address them. And then people vote on the company. And at the end, we award somebody a trophy. And at least I think at this one it's at least a $25,000 investment.
And do most of these presenting companies raise money from the audience? Are they able to, maybe not right then and there, or maybe then and there, but
sometimes there then and there. But usually it takes a few months before we know whether people have succeeded or not. Yes, some companies will raise a lot, some companies will raise a little, and some companies will raise nothing. Sometimes something looks good on paper. But when you put it up on stage and you really start to pick it apart, you find out that it's not really as good a deal as you thought it was, right? And that's part of the benefit of this multi-phase approach is that at each level you're catching more of the things. But also there's been examples of companies that have come and presented that got like basically booed off the stage who later turned into like huge successes.
Can you give an example?
Oh, yes. What was it? A Canvas RX got bought by Aurora, I believe, for a really large sum of money. And they presented on our stage at what people thought was a very, very high valuation, which was why they weren't able to raise capital out of our group.
By the way, do you give out tomatoes to the audience?
It's evil.
So they got like, I can't believe you're at that valuation. And something like a year and a half later, they sold for like 5 or 6x the valuation that they were. So sometimes that happens, right? And so But yeah, and then other times people will literally walk off the stage and be completely done. And then sometimes we have companies, what they'll do is they may have their round basically done, but they'll hold at least a few $100,000 aside for Arcview members because they know the power of when this group gets behind it. Because even the people who are not on your cap table are still cheering for you, and it makes us want to tout to the world everything that you're up to for eternity, right? So there's some benefit in companies, holding at least a few $100,000 aside for our members.
So let's go in the way back time machine for a second. You started Arcview in 2010 with Steve D'Angelo. Mm-hmm. You talk about that moment where you and you were over a beer, you were smoking a joint, something happened, and you looked at each other and went, Arcview. Can you take us through that moment?
Yeah. So I had kind of, I was working at the Marijuana Policy Project at the time. I was their lead fundraiser. So my job was to gather donations from really wealthy people, both in the cannabis sector and outside of the cannabis sector. Now, remember, this is 2009, so in the cannabis sector was
really small,
tiny. And so most people were outside of the cannabis sector, and they were donating not because they had any thought to create wealth or anything like that with it. They were donating because they simply cared about ending cannabis prohibition for the justice reasons. But if they were people who could donate $10,000 or $100,000 to the cause, they were also people with money who had investments. And what they started to see was that they were donating and creating essentially a new industry. And they were kind of surprised by that and started to get interested in investing. And what I noticed is that they didn't know anything. they for whatever they knew in their other world, they weren't able to apply it here. And I just watched them make stupid mistakes. And then also the people I was raising money from within the cannabis sector, they didn't know how to pitch. They didn't know how to put a deck together. They didn't understand, they didn't know the people I knew.
This is 2 years before Colorado went adult use,
Oh, this
right?
is 2009 is...
Oh, no, 3, right? 12 was when Colorado passed.
More like 4 because it happens in November of 2012. And then the other thing that was interesting about Colorado is even when it passed, most people didn't think it was actually going to happen until it happened, right? It wasn't until January of 2014 when there was the news, worldwide news of people walking out of stores with cannabis out in the open in front of the television
and
cameras.
got stoned on CNN.
Right. So that people didn't think legalization really happened until that day, right? So we're talking this is 5 years before that time, okay? And so I had known Steve because I was trying to raise money from him for MPP. And we just built a really good bond actually by disagreeing with each other. We disagreed about the politics in California and how it was going to get done at the time. And we both really liked how each other disagreed with each other. And so when I came to him and I said, Steve, look at this. There's all these people that want in. There's this huge opportunity in ancillary products and services in the cannabis sector. And at the time, Harborside had to be a nonprofit, right? So it was like let's build a for-profit business that actually does this. Right. And he was like, well, he saw the flip side of the problem I was seeing. All these entrepreneurs, tons of people with beautiful, wonderful ideas that weren't fully baked that he couldn't act on and didn't know how to sort them or anything like that. And so within a few minutes of me explaining to him, he was like, it was one of these like things where he was like, absolutely, let's go into business. And we had like maybe 2 other meetings and he became our first investor. And frankly, we didn't even know what we were really going to do. We just knew there was an opportunity and that both of us wanted to be in business together and that we would figure out the business model as we went along.
So that's your first check. Do you remember the first company that pitched Arcview?
I do. I do. It was MJ Freeway.
Wow.
Really? Yep. Jessica, huh?
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. MJ Freeway was the very first company to present. And I think it was like a $4 million valuation, something like that, right? And this is now, MJ Freeway is now a Krane. with I don't know what's their market cap.
About 100.
100 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, they presented. They had their what is it? What do we call it? CRM.
It's a seat to sale tracking
seat-to-sale
software.
tracking platform, right?
Yeah.
And they presented. They did not raise money. It actually took a couple years before we actually had any real checks written. They did eventually raise money. They met Joby Pritzker at that meeting. Joby was one of the first dozen or so members, and then it was Dow Capital, which is Joby's family office, that became one of their first investors a few years later. So sometimes that's a good lesson, which is that sometimes, even when you don't get money, you build relationships that turn out really well later.
Let's pivot, because we've talked about money for a lot.
Yeah.
And we're going to still talk about money, but Arcview is for the most part focused on private investing. It's private investors investing in pre-public and oftentimes pre-revenue companies.
Yep.
But a lot of your companies that have come through Arcview have graduated to the public markets. And 2019 was a shitty year for public cannabis companies. What do you think 2020 is going to look like from a public market perspective specifically?
Yeah, well, we're already starting to see some recovery, in part because I think the earnings are coming back, showing that companies are recovering, particularly in a lot of the states like Michigan, Massachusetts, and others where there's real opportunity.
Massachusetts
not as much, but there's some real opportunity.
Illinois
is coming along. So there's some really unique opportunities, and at Arcview we just put out our new market numbers, and we showing that in 2018 the market grew 48%. That may be the largest jump in a single year in worldwide sales, retail sales, and we're showing that so it's now about a $15 billion market. It's growing.
Licit market.
Licit.
Yeah.
Growing to a $42 billion market by 2024. So that's about a 23% compound annual growth rate. I believe this is the only industry with that kind of growth rate where the public stocks are at like a third of what they were, a quarter of what they were before. That's opportunity, right? And if you plot the growth of this market against the growth of the market cap of the major companies, what you'll find is we're in a real dip right now. This is a real opportunity, and so I think we're going to see them recover. I think it might be a while before they recover past their peak, because I think that we all agreed there needed to be a correction there to some degree.
Yeah, but
I think there's an overcorrection.
70%, you have to grow 140% just to get back to par.
Exactly. Now, I do think that there is real hope for that in November. We're going to be on a bunch of ballots. And if we can raise the money...
You're skipping ahead.
Oh,
no, it's fine. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
And if we can raise the money in these next 6 to 10 weeks, really, of get real visibility on the resources, we can put even more states on the ballot.
So you come out of advocacy, right?
Yeah.
You said you were with Marijuana Policy Project. You with our friends Kris, Krane,
Yep.
Shay Gunther, our producer, is one of your oldest friends.
Yeah.
Chris Lotlikar helped found Students for Sensible Drug Policy. You guys are in large part responsible for the medical movement and the adult use movement. There are going to be anywhere from 4 to 8 states that will have ballot initiatives coming up this year. How much does it cost to get a state legal? Give an example of Arizona, right? Mm-hmm. Arizona most likely will have a ballot initiative to go from a medical market to an adult use market. How much money does that cost from an advocacy perspective to get that state to go legal?
Yeah, I don't know. In each state, I'm not up to speed on the specifics, and every state's very different. But I would suspect that Arizona's probably in the $4 to $6 million range.
Okay, and what about like a state like Ohio?
Ohio's another ballgame because they have a very, very difficult process for getting on the ballot, and they also have a lot of media markets represented in Ohio, so the ads are hard. But Ohio is probably more than 10 million. And so every state's very, very different. And then you juxtapose that with legislative states. So there's only 21 states in the union that have ballot initiatives that you can actually put on the ballot. And the rest you have to go through the legislature. Now, going through the legislature is much cheaper, but it takes much longer. And it
other than Illinois, it hasn't worked, right?
Well, I mean, it's worked for medical.
Yeah, but not for adult use.
And then Vermont for adult use, but not tax and regulate.
That's an
right.
ish.
It's an ish, right? Sure. But I think that now that the bow has broken with Illinois, I think that we've got an opportunity in a wide range of other states.
Well, New York,
exactly,
Cuomo now has said that he's putting it into his budget, right? So that's a legislative moment. New Jersey shit the bed. Mm-hmm. It did. I mean, understandably so. It's not like it was not ill intent. It was the issues in New Jersey were around social justice, social equity, expungement, and it looks like it's going to be on the ballot in 2020. So that's a good example. New Jersey sandwiched between Philadelphia and New York, and the number 1 and number 5 most expensive media markets in the country. How expensive do you think that New Jersey is going to be a heavy lift to get done?
Well, I think the polling in New Jersey is very strong, and so that always reduces the cost a little bit. But because it's so important and because it's right there, if you pass New Jersey, they all have to go.
It kind of is a domino, right?
It's a real domino. And also, New Jersey's very unique, too, because this is not a citizens' initiative. This is the legislature putting an initiative on the ballot, which is quite rare. I don't think that happens very often in New Jersey. So the New Jersey voters are not used to voting on ballot initiatives like California voters. I mean, California voters, it's like,
it's like
30
7 hours to vote.
Yeah, it takes hours to vote, right? So this is going to be very interesting in New Jersey, and we do want to make sure we have the resources to really make sure.
Are we going to see Kevin Sabet all over New Jersey?
I'm sure we will. He's a trip.
Oh, we didn't even talk about your Fox Biz segment the other day.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah. What shall we say about that?
Well, so you were on with Kennedy, right?
Yes.
The old MTVJ who became a conservative radio host who is now on Fox Business, and she had a quote unquote debate between you and Kevin Sabet. Now, for our listeners who don't know who Kevin Sabet is, he is maybe the last prohibitionist out there,
or at least the most vocal.
Yeah, and he takes a unique position of him and Alex Berenson take very unique positions and cherry pick data. And you were in the belly of the beast in Foxland.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
It was great. I actually came away from it kind of feeling bad for Kevin Sabet because I don't think Kennedy gave him a chance to really, make his case fully. And I was certain if they let him make his case more fully, one, it would have been easier to pick it apart. And two, for the people in the audience who maybe kind of lean in his direction or are unsure, when you're unfair to a guest, it makes it hard to, for them to be, sympathetic to your cause. Right?
Yeah, we should say Kennedy's very pro, cannabis, pro legalization, and she just eviscerated him. And you were kind of along for the ride.
Yes, but part of it was great because she got in the weeds with him, and that allowed me to really make kind of be above the fray and make the points that I wanted to make.
You were like the elder statesman. It was delicious.
It was definitely fun to watch.
It was fun. It was fun to do too, and it was fun to be backstage. It was the most active green room I've ever been in my life. There was people were they had like these pundits on who come on and talk to her. It was I've been in a lot of green rooms and they're always really sleepy. This was a hopping green room. I mean, people were having a good time. They
had cigar girls passing out,
It was great.
So our mutual friend, Krane.
Yes.
He thinks that there's a pretty good chance that this year, Donald Trump is going to do something on cannabis, whether it's reschedule, deschedule, something to steal the issue away from the Democrats. And with Joe Biden looking like a potential candidate here, who is not a friend of or nominee, not a friend of the cannabis industry at all. He is literally the worst Democrat running for president right now. What do you think the likelihood of Donald Trump, trying to steal this issue is?
I think it's plausible, but it's been interesting to watch this administration because
I would not use the word interesting.
because because there have been a lot of things that seem obvious to me, like obvious opportunities to score political points or to do something popular with a wide range of people that they've not done. So
it's because Vladimir Putin hasn't told them to do it yet.
I guess if they were trying to do something. They're doing a lot of things that seem like the thing you would do if you were trying to be less popular, right? And so
it doesn't work. He's still 40%.
I know, it's nuts.
It's insane.
But I think on this issue, it's so obvious. The polling, it's like it's a softball. It is, especially if the nominee is Biden. If the nominee is anybody else, it's not as valuable because the other nominees are all super pro cannabis. And so but if it's Biden, it's an easy outflank. And which is one of the reasons why I think we got to be careful about Biden because this is another attack that none of the pundits are going to notice this as one of the ways that he may be weak. Because this is an easy outflank. Because, look, cannabis legalization is popular among Republicans, and most people don't realize that.
Are people who care about cannabis, does it rank high enough in their hierarchy of issues to sway a vote, or is it just kind of something that's in the back of their mind?
I think for different demographics, it is important. Particularly younger people, particularly independent, intermittent voters, really care about cannabis.
You've been doing this a long time. You've been involved in activism and in the cannabis space for 25 years. If you could go back in time and tell your 25 years ago and say, hey, Troy, you should know this. This is what is the thing that you would counsel yourself when you were in college about what's coming?
Well, and I would say this for almost everything, right? Not just cannabis, but everything. If I could go back to my 18, 19-year-old self, I would say, relax. Just put one foot in front of the other, my friend. Like, you're on the right path. Just believe it's all going to work out just fine. Just keep getting up every morning and doing what you care about and not keep worrying about where the chips are going to fall, right? And, it was actually Chuck Thomas, who's one of the co-founders of the Marijuana Policy Project, when I started volunteering there the year that they started in 1995. And I said, Chuck, you've been doing this for so long. When do you think it's going to happen? When do you think cannabis is going to be legal? Do you think what if it takes forever? And he said, I don't worry about that at all. I just get up every morning and I get stuff done because, when you look at history, what you find is that it doesn't matter. There's always going to be, he said, there's always going to be people trying to deprive people of liberty for what they put in their bodies. And it could be that I'm alive during a time when, while I'm alive, the ball doesn't go all the way over to the other line. But if I wasn't there fighting, it could be so far in the other direction. And so I don't concern myself with that because I'm just one person and there's people before me and there's people after me. I just want to know I'm the one on the side of fighting for liberty. And that's kind of how I've really tried to approach it. It just happens to be the luck of the draw that while I was fighting for liberty, the thing actually happened.
Stephen Cotter says that the distraction economy, that's everything that's used to alter your brain chemistry. It could be anything from television shows or books or drugs, is a $10 trillion global industry.
Absolutely.
So
all of this stuff is working on dopamine and serotonin in different ways. And, we think that we're scrolling, hitting the button on our Facebook because we want more information or to connect with people. But there's another storyline, which is we're looking for dopamine, right? And so it's everywhere, and it's getting better at accomplishing that. And so really it really gets more fundamental, which is that ultimately we all need to be able to find within ourselves something that's strong in order to be aware that these things are doing this, whether it's drugs or it's television or it's social media or it's food. The forces that are hijacking us are getting stronger and stronger, and we're not going to legislate that away.
And it hasn't worked. I mean, the prohibition economy has never worked because it is inherent in human nature to try and find something to alter your consciousness.
Exactly.
Whether it's heading towards a flow state where you're at peak performance or just you want to distract and shut off.
Totally. And it's why I'm so excited about this flow state. You mentioned Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel, Stealing Fire, all this.
Love those books.
Okay, wait. Can we talk about what that is?
So the concept of flow is that when you are in peak performance, that your body and your mind are stressed to the point that you literally go into the next level, right? So, and you've probably had those moments when you're playing a game. You were an athlete in college, right? And you just take it up. High school, you were an athlete. You went to that next level. There are ways to hack your brain to get you there on a consistent basis. And that's the concept of flow that Stephen Cotter and Jamie Wheel talk about in a book called Stealing Fire. There's another book called Napping Cloud 9. They actually have a training seminar for a week out in California. This is what Silicon Valley is focused on. This is actually what the big banks are focused on
big
how
sports.
Everybody.
Yeah.
But this concept of altering your consciousness to achieve a different level of experience and to make you a better human being. It's not something that you can keep for a permanent period of time. It's short bursts of time. It could be 14 seconds, it could be 14 minutes or 14 hours, but you can't keep it that way. But how do you get to that point? And then how do you integrate the experience? How do you take the lessons that you learn from being in that flow state and bring it into the rest of your life? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I see, and I can see cannabis as being in service to that, and sometimes not being of service to it. It's all how you orient to your experience and sensing into whether it's bringing you closer to feeling on or further, and recognizing the value of sort of neurodiversity within your own being, right? That you got to have good sleep, and you got to exercise, and you got to meditate, and you got to eat right, and you got to have fun, and you got to have human connection, and you've got to see the world from a wide range of
you have
perspectives.
To be an animal. I mean, we are animals, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we often forget that humans are just primates that have bigger brains and a big ass that allows us to stand upright.
Right. I mean, it's a really interesting thing, this whole, it's funny. We're here, we're talking about cannabis, and we're talking about business, and we're talking about politics. But fundamentally, what is this drive? What is this drive? I mean, really what we're doing is altering consciousness. And it begs the question, what is consciousness? It begs the question, what is it that gets us, when we consume cannabis, gets us more interested in the creative aspects of life, or helps us really think about what's important, or we laugh a lot, or whatever. There's just nothing more valuable in this world than a change in perspective, because our whole culture is built around getting us to get stuck in a perspective that serves the powers that be. And cannabis is so powerful at helping us kind of pop out of that. And there's so many other ways to do that too, and it's one of the reasons that this medicine's so interesting.
Well, one of the things about cannabis is it changes your perspective of time, right? Because we are creatures that take our experience and use that to predict forward, and that we look back often, and it's rare that we are just in the moment, which is the concept of flow, right? You are there. There is no yesterday, there is no tomorrow, there just is now. And one of the things that they are researching about cannabis is that it shuts off for a period of time that forward prediction engine and that reflective engine. And it's why when you listen to music when you're high, it is a much more transcendent experience, because it's like you're hearing those notes for the first time again and again. And there is a belief that at higher doses, cannabis is a form of a psychedelic, which has that impact of shutting down or influencing the default mode network. And I find this stuff, I mean, yes, we are talking, and we're going to get back to the business of this, but the concept of the impact that cannabis has on your consciousness is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things we're going to be doing at the next Arcview, part of the deal is that I said, well, if I'm going to switch out of the CEO role, you got to let me do some outside the box kind of things. And they were like, okay. So we're actually gonna have sound healers, like people that create like a sound journey for people, where people can consume cannabis and then they all lay down, and this group comes in and plays like singing bowls and gongs and stuff like that, and uses aromatherapy and stuff to really take people on a journey and introduce these investors and entrepreneurs in some cases to a new way to utilize cannabis for inner exploration.
And historically, Arcview has only been focused on cannabis companies. I have encouraged you guys to look at psychedelic companies as well, because as an agency, KCSA is now moving into that space. It's the next big thing from a business perspective, and both from a personal and professional perspective, it is the thing to help treat the global mental health crisis that we are facing. Let's get back to what we were talking about. And I think this is all leads into to literally my favorite question that I ask of every guest, which is about failure. You have been a success in your career, and you have had this moment when Ampology and Entourage put money into Arcview, benefited you, right? And that's great, and I'm happy for you, and I think everybody should have that moment. But you've had some tremendous failures in your life, right? And
Thanks, Lewis.
Well, look, man, I have
Jeez, my God.
What? We all fail until we succeed.
I thought this was going to be an easy interview.
Yeah, man. But you learn from failure. You don't learn from success. Anybody can step into success, but it's those moments where you went, oh man, I fucked up, and what is the lesson so that I don't? Because failure is pain, and we run away from pain and towards pleasure. What is the pain that you have learned from that has helped make you the success today?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I wouldn't say this was super painful, but I did learn a lot for it. It'll sound painful, but I don't think it actually was. Around 2012, late 2011, 2012, so Steve D'Angelo had invested the money he was going to invest, and we kind of gave me like a year or so to figure out how to have a business model that would keep me alive and funded. And, by that point, we didn't have that yet. I mean, we had a couple $1,000s coming in a month, but that was, just not enough really to keep me afloat. And so I had to make a decision as to whether I wanted to have a social life or a home. And if I wanted to do the things I wanted to do, or if I wanted to live somewhere. I didn't have the money to do both.
And where were you at this point?
I was in Oakland, California. And I decided that I was going to give up my home. So for about 9 months.
Were you married at the time?
No.
Okay.
For about 9 months, I was homeless. I lived in my car. I stayed on people's couches. And, it was interesting. It was, in retrospect, people say, oh, wow, I was fine. I mean, granted, I'm very privileged in that, I have a lot of friends who have resources and they like me. So, it's not
you
the
had
same.
meals, you had a job to
yeah,
go to.
it's not the same as when you're homeless and you don't have that kind of a network. Right. So I don't want to glorify homelessness in any way. But what I learned during that time is that I'm fine. Like, you could take all of this away and it'd be fine. But it also kind of gave me a lot of fire too, because there's this sense of I was willing to sacrifice to keep this business alive, to keep the lights on, to really, stand up for what I believed in and fight for what I believed. And keep in mind that around that time was a few months before Colorado and Washington passed legalization. And so I was actually, by the end of 2012, I was thinking that maybe we would close down Arcview, that actually it wasn't working. And I was looking at other potential career moves and at that point. But it was really Steve D'Angelo. Steve D'Angelo never wavered. I mean, Steve D'Angelo, of course, easy for him to say he wasn't sleeping on couches.
No, but he was in jail, right? There were times during that time he was in jail.
No, not that was years before.
Yeah.
But point is that he was like, no, cannabis is going to change the world. It's going to be a huge business, and we're going to turn on, billions of people to the benefits of it. And just you wait and see. Hold on, Troy. And I'm like, okay. And then sure enough, I raised a bunch of money for the Colorado ballot initiative, and we won. And then the phone started ringing. Come January 2013, phone starts ringing. And we got on the...
Where was that phone, by the way?
In Oakland.
No, because you would... I mean, I guess...
Oh, right.
You had
I
an
was
office,
living,
right?
Yes. I was living in a little tiny studio cottage behind someone's house in Oakland, very, very small. And it was me, Michael Blunk, Jess Dugan, and David Abernathy. We each had a spot on my kitchen table, because there's 4 sides to a table. That's how many desks we had. It was 4 people with their laptops. And here we were on the cover of Fortune magazine, the cover, in April of 2013. And here we were all huddled around a table in a 1-bedroom cottage in Oakland. And it was just this great irony. But that set the stage for what's come, which is, Fortune was the first time that they had done the big story on the cannabis sector, that a major business publication had done that, and it was us. Well, that was what helped the phone start ringing. And after that, we got members, and then people started actually making investments. And, it's true. If you build it, they will come sometimes. This time that eventually happened.
Let's go to Troy. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much. Our last question that we always ask guests is, what's the one story that you think the media is missing when it comes to reporting on cannabis? What's the most underreported story that just drives you banana pants?
I used to have an answer to this all the time. Because that was my sort of thing with reporters for many years. Is I get on the call and I always have like this story that they weren't telling that I thought they could be telling. But something happened in the last, year or two where there's enough people on the cannabis beat that I think they're telling most of the stories. I think if anything, I would love to see more of what we were seeing a few years ago, which is these sort of human interest stories around the stories of entrepreneurs and investors and the trials and tribulations and the overcoming of things. I mean, we've kind of gotten away from that because it's not as novel as it was before as a business. But those stories that we were telling a few years ago are still just as exciting, and there's just as riveting as they were then. It's just that the media has kind of moved on to talking about the market growth and the dips in the market and the this and the that, right? There's all of this kind of stuff. It's now being reported on like it's the tech industry,
a real
or something
industry,
like that. And
yeah. Do
right,
you think
which
that's
is great.
just a result of your hard work, and that's actually a good thing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's wonderful that that's happening, but there is something lost in it, and that is that the what's lost is that people are forgetting that we're not just an industry. That as long as there are people going to jail and getting arrested anywhere in this world, we're still a movement, and that seems to be falling out of the storylines. And then also just the amount of risk and the amount of reverence and the amount of guts that it takes to start a business or to invest in a business in this sector, and what people need to overcome in order to do that, and the challenges that they face when they do it. That is great drama. That is really exciting stuff to be writing about. And I see every day that we get taken more seriously that they forget about those stories.
You guys have meetings in Santa Monica. You've had them in New York. Where else do you have your meetings?
Oh, we've had them all over. Toronto, New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Vancouver, L.A., Vegas.
I was at the Vegas one.
Yeah.
Yep.
So so we have them all over the place, and then also we'll probably be rolling out some smaller events. In where we have clusters of people. So we have a lot of people in Dallas and in Houston and in Atlanta and in Miami, right? So rather than having huge meetings, having opportunities for the local people that are local to really get together and do more of that.
So getting back to that kid from Oklahoma, right? And he's saying, look, is this played out? Is there still opportunity for me? Is it played out? Because a lot of people who have an entrepreneurial spirit see the MSOs and they think, oh, these are super tankers. They're not. They're all still very small companies.
Right.
Where do you see the opportunity for people now?
Well, so this whole idea that maybe the ship has sailed is bananas, right? I mean, we're in the second inning, maybe the third inning, right? But there's also this concept of, the pioneers get slaughtered and the settlers prosper, right? I think we're right at that mode where we're figuring out which of the pioneers are going to get slaughtered and which are going to make it through to be able to ride with the settlers. And it's now the time that the settlers are coming in, and where a lot of the pioneers have taken so many arrows that the new people don't need to take anymore. And so I really think that there couldn't be a better time to get involved than what we have right now, because I think that it's a very special time. We're right before all the Fortune 500 companies come in, but we're still at a time where there's a lot of room for a better mousetrap. And how do you know how to make a better mousetrap? You look at the mousetraps that have already been built and you make a better one. There's always room for a better mousetrap.
I mean, I know we said we were going to be done, but we're not done.
Okay.
Unless you have to go.
No, go for it.
Let's talk about some of those settlers, and we don't have to name names, but any public cannabis company is struggling for cash now, right? And, we thought that 2019 was going to be the year of the M&A. We had talked to Alan Brockstein at the end of 2018, and he said, I expect, to see, lots of mergers and acquisitions. And there were some big ones. Most of them still haven't closed yet. Given this cash crunch, do you see this year being a year of shotgun marriages, of marriages of equals, of companies selling themselves off for parts? I mean, what's going to happen this year?
Yeah, I think we're going to see all of the above, and we're also going to see things that are like it's going to be hard to pick trends, because there's some companies, if they're running out of cash, when you're running out of cash, you got to make decisions to stay alive, right? And then the companies that have the cash are going to be in a whole different situation, because they're going to want to be able to benefit from buying up companies that are struggling. So it's really going to depend on cash management and cash flow and access to cash. And so that's going to depend on everything.
The access to cash has been hard, right? I mean, last year, we had Richard Carlton on, who is the CEO of the Canadian Securities Exchange, and he said we had more listings in 2019 than we did in 2018 or 2017, but the amount of capital that they raised was significantly less. The guys who need to raise capital, there's not a lot of sources of money. So are your Arcview members now looking at putting money into the public companies, whether they're doing, pipes, which is a private investment into a public entity, or, distressed debt?
Yeah, there's some of that for sure. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword, the lack of capital in the public markets, right? On the one hand, it's good for private investors because, about a year ago, everybody was, if you're a private investor, you're competing with this funny money, right, from the public markets. These companies just have basically free money, and they can drive the price up of these private deals, both in terms of investing in, but also when you look at the multiples that people are getting on their companies, that also causes an inflation of the private market because they can say, look, this company like us just sold for, 30x. So that justifies a higher valuation. So now that money is gone, the valuations are so much more reasonable, and they're not competing with this funny money when they're in a deal. So that's the positive side. The downside is, depending on how long you think this cash crunch is going to last, it also means that you have to make sure that the companies you're investing in have enough access to capital or a business model that's going to reduce their need for capital sooner, because there isn't these companies that are necessarily going to save the day and give you a return on your investment right away. So there's the ecosystem, the funding ecosystem is missing a rung right now. But
when do you think the spigot's going to open up again?
I believe the spigot is going to open up probably in November.
Oh, that late?
But no, I think it's slowly already starting to happen a little bit. But I think really, if we have a big day on election day, or it looks like they're all going to pass, or a lot of them are going to pass, I think that opens up a lot of markets. I think we start to see real movement, and I think that causes people to realize that the opportunity is huge.
So you've seen every deal that Arcview has seen, right? Have you put your own money in on occasion?
I have not.
You've never invested?
I haven't had. I was living on a couch.
Did you miss that part of the story, Louis?
Did you miss that part?
That's 10 years ago or 8 years ago.
Yeah, I'm been helping Arcview succeed. So no, in terms of my own personal capital,
right. Okay,
not as much. And also, I'm already, overly invested into the sector. If anything, I need to diversify into other sectors right now, because right now it's like, a very, very disproportionate amount of my net worth is stuck in a very exciting but private company in the cannabis sector called Arcview.
Okay, man. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating. We're going to want to have you back. If we're going to publish this next week, so if people want to come to Arcview in Santa Monica,
yes,
how do they do that?
Best thing to do is to go to arcviewgroup.com and click a button that says you're an investor, and make sure you're an accredited investor, and fill out the form. And we got people hop on a call with you, talk you through it, and get you squared away. We'd love to have you. We are full on companies. So if you're a company and you're interested in working with Arcview, you can go through another route on the website, and you can apply to be part of our selection process for the next one, as well as if you're interested in sponsoring a future event, there will be opportunities there as well.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Troy.
Yeah.
Thank you,
pleasure.
Troy.
Thanks for having us.
Our thanks to Troy Dayton from Arcview. Check them out at arcviewgroup.com. Troy, are you on social media?
I am.
Where can we find you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm T Dazzle with no E on the end. T Dazzle on Twitter. And I guess Facebook. I'm just looking for Troy Dayton.
Okay. As always, we want to thank our audience for listening. If you want to chat with us, you can find us on Twitter with the handle @the_greenrush, or on Instagram @the_greenrush_podcast. Still drives me nuts that we don't have the same frickin' handles for both things. You can always drop us an It does. It just drives me nuts.
We need to learn how to use your inner voice there, Lewis.
No. There is no inner voice. This is like I am exactly who I am. You can drop us an email at greenrush@kcsa. We're always looking for your feedback, for guest ideas, for pretty much anything. Hate mail, bring it on. Fuck Donald Trump. And by the way, fuck Joe Biden. Don't forget to subscribe to the Green Rush in your favorite podcatcher. Give us a rating and review. It helps others to find us. And as always, I want to personally thank you for giving us your time for listening. You know, the only thing that you have that is truly finite is the time in your life. And by spending it with us, you're not spending it elsewhere. And we really appreciate it. That's one take, Shay. One motherfucking take.